Alright, welcome to the next episode. What we're going to do here today is we are going to clean up this surface basically all the way up. You can see here, this is kind of sticking out a little bit and around. So the point of this is so we can eventually, hopefully in this episode, drill our new holes for where the transom will mount. You can kind of see that one's sticking out a little bit. We need to fix that. This one is probably the most flat I can see here. And we'll prep it basically so we can eventually lay a line of Kevlar down here, because I will run Kevlar along this edge. It just kind of helps seals this surface so water doesn't find its way into here. So there you go. That's what we're going to do here on this part of the series. You can see there is a lot to clean up. So what are we going to use to do this? And here it is. It's the grinder. So what you're going to want to do is try to use one of your older wheels, and I'll show you why. If you use one of the newer wheels, it's going to be more likely to gouge back here, and this is where you really don't want to gouge the transom, because you're going to paint the surface and you really want this to be super flat, so you don't want to make any kind of gouge mark. So if you do have an older sanding wheel that you just wasn't quite cutting it, but it's kind of dull, this is a good time to use it if you've saved any of them. If you use a brand new one, you're likely going to gouge this area up pretty bad. So kind of one of those little tricks here. So this whole surface, you're going to want to clean that up. We'll go back and repair it again with some epoxy if you do happen to gouge it a little bit. You can see we got some spiders here. So we're going to try to clean up this area. And like this piece right here needs to get knocked off. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and put my breather on and we'll get working on it. All right. Nice and smooth. I went along this edge here, kind of smoothed it out because I want to give something on the outermost edge, something for that Kevlar to stick to. So I took off the gel coat just along this edge here, and like I said, we'll lay a strip of it and it'll butt up right to that very edge. It'll look real nice, and it'll kind of help protect the seam too all the way up. Got a little bit more gel coat to take off right there, but as a whole, this is what we're looking for. The next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to work on drilling these holes out, because we want to get that started too, because there's some tricks to sealing off these holes to make sure we don't have any leaks that happen through there. So we'll talk about how we're going to do that. Okay, so you may be contemplating using like a spade. These are 1/2-inch holes, by the way. So you may be contemplating, well, let's use a spade to go through it, but it's probably not going to be the best idea. What you're going to want to do with this versus how we did the drain plug is you're going to want to start a pilot hole first, and this way you make sure you get the right angle. Getting the correct angle on these holes, I've found, is kind of tricky, because if you note, well, it's kind of hard to see, but it's not exactly, I mean, if you drill this way, it's going to be wrong. You actually have to drill, and you would know this if you had to do this before, but you actually have to drill kind of up, because the transom plate kind of comes down at an angle. So that's something to consider when you're drilling through these, is you're going to need to follow a correct angle to get through this. Now, if you saw my earlier video series when we were doing the demo on the transom, you may have seen my recommendation where I said to try to keep the inside of where the transom was mounted before. And I'll tell you why. Because what you can do is line up the bottom. All right, this is what we're going to do now in a minute when we go inside, is we're going to line up the bottom here, And what we'll do is the center of this hole, we'll go ahead and make a mark. Same thing with this one, that one, that one, this one, and this one here. This one is kind of hard to see, so we're not going to mark that one. But by the time that you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes, you'll have the basic idea on what angle you'll need to be drilling at. So by the time, you know, in my case, I have to drill that one by line of sight based on these. I'll have that down anyway. So just kind of one of those tricks. If you don't have this template like I did, I'll show you another trick that may help you out. Okay, so you can see I've lined up the bottom pretty well. And then the other thing you want to do is try to square up the top. You can kind of see I haven't leveled out where the steering arm is going to swing yet, but that is still underway. We'll get to that here pretty soon. That'll be another episode. So what we're going to do is mark these holes. All right, we're going to mark those so this way we have the proper angle. All right, so you can see here, there's my hole, and there's kind of like the angle. What we're going to do is find where this hole is, and I'll mark just along the edge right here, and we can draw a straight line, and then we'll find out what that angle is. All right, so what I did here is I made a mark in the center of this hole, and then I have a mark at the center of this hole, and then use a straight edge. Same thing over here, so I have the right angle. And what this will do is allow you to get your drill out and kind of have an eye as you're holding your drill out. You'll have an extension of that drill bit sticking at this direction. And the trick is this way you can follow that same line, that same curvature with your drill bit. All right. And this is kind of what I'm talking about here. So you can kind of see, you can pitch your drill bit at a few different angles, but here's a cool little trick. Kind of helps you gauge which way to start drilling. So one thing is you don't want to start drilling like this, and you don't want to pitch straight up. So the best thing to do is to draw the center line like I did over there. If anything, what'll happen is if you do drill like obviously like in the wrong direction, when you go to put your transom plate on, you'll see that the holes don't line up, and you may have to come in and re-drill the angle a little bit. So I've had to do that before. It was off just by a little bit on some of the holes. So if you do have to re-drill it for any reason, it's not the end of the world. Just try to do like I said there, and hopefully you followed the part of the video where I said to save that side of the transom, because it does make a huge difference when you go to redo it here. The angle, which is kind of different based on the type of boat that you're using. I've got like a little protractor here. I'm sitting at roughly like 70, there's a parallax for you watching of it's like 73 degrees. And then this is roughly like 73 as well. So probably not going to help you based on, because everyone's boat is shaped a little bit different, but that's kind of how the pitch of mine is. It actually follows your angle of the back of the boat will follow the angle that it needs to shoot upwards. So just keep that in mind as you're drilling here. Just keep with the same angle. But without further ado, let's go ahead and start drilling some of these out. Okay, so I started a pilot hole right there. Now we'll move up to the 1/2 inch. Oh, by the way, the hole length here, when everything's said and done, is 1/2. So whatever you do your pilot, just remember you're going to end up at a 1/2 inch. Okay, so I kind of left the drill bit in here so you can kind of see what it looks like. Like I said, if you do end up finding out that one of the holes isn't drilled as you'd like, you'll be able to kind of re-drill it afterwards. When we get to that point of the project, you'll see it when it happens. If it does, and it may, you'll just go in here and kind of drill it again. It won't hurt anything. You'll just have to change the angle just a little bit, but it'll be all right. All right, and that is it. I have all 6 holes drilled. We've cleaned up the edges real nice. You can see going right through. The bolts that are going to go through this are not exactly 1/2 inch either, by the way, so they do leave some room for error if your holes are off, just to let you know. Alright, so for this next part, I chose to test and make sure that the actual transom assembly will fit in there, and and this way it'll make sure the holes are lined up and all that fun stuff. So it's probably a good time to do it. You know, you want to make sure the holes are cut right, so you can do 2 things. Number 1 is you want to make sure the angle when these bolts go in are correct, and then this part will also tell you right here if you need to sand any more along this edge. Kind of important, right? Same thing down here where the exhaust goes through. You want to make sure you're not doing, number 1, extra work, and then you want to also make sure that these bolts are at the correct angle. And just so you're aware, in accordance to this, these are 90 degrees. So that's something to consider too. So let's go ahead and see if it'll fit. And we'll see if the angle is good. If not, we'll take it off, re-drill it, and go from there. Alright, so what do you think? I've got the gimbal assembly attached to the transom, just for a test. Used plenty of washers there, and actually pulled it all the way right against the transom. The reason I did this was for a few reasons. I wanted to check clearance around certain key areas. I'm also putting, or I'm planning on putting, Kevlar around certain areas. So I want to make sure that when I go to attach this, I'm not going to run into clearance issues. So what I'm going to do now is, one of the spots that I found clearance issues is right along this edge here. So I'm going to take my marker and make some mental notes just so I can see how little clearance I have on either side. So I'll come back afterwards and grind it a little bit. Just a little trick there. You want to double check all your areas, because if you are just going to seal it just with a epoxy or polyester resin, probably not a big deal. But I like to run Kevlar, or in my last project I actually ran polyester or 1708 on this edge just to give it a little bit more strength, completely seal it up. We're actually going to also run some epoxy inside of the holes too. Now that we know that it is at the right angle, I'll definitely epoxy the inside of those holes. So it looks good. This is how you mock up the entire gimbal assembly after you've drilled these holes. You want to do this. I know it's a lot of work because you got to put your hydraulics, and it's tough, but I'm telling you, this is the way to do it. It's going to make life a lot easier moving forward. So definitely don't bypass this step. You don't want to do it later on when you've got the flooring installed. It makes a mess. You can see all this that we've got down here. It just makes a lot of mess, and you don't want to have to do it. You want to get all your epoxy and Kevlar or fiberglass done now, so it's peace of mind when you go to install this. You're going to be good to go. Keep that in mind. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and remove all this and start working on putting Kevlar along these sides in here. I'm also going to make some marks, like I said, some tactical marks of where I need to sand a little bit. Like that area is alright. We've got just enough room, but I may sand it just a tad. We'll see. But that's it. I hope you liked this part of the video. As always, hit that subscribe button if you aren't already subscribed to my channel. Like the video if you thought this was helpful. Leave me some comments. Let me know how I'm doing. And we will catch you on the next episode. Have a good one, everybody.